when we need to be tough for the ones we love. The story of an uncle, a teenager, and the rebuilding of trust. You know that feeling when you don't recognize your own home anymore? That's how I felt when I realized my money was disappearing. My name is Laert, I'm 34 years old, and I've always worked hard and tried to be a pillar for my family, especially my nephew Vinicius. I always wanted him to have a role model of a responsible man, someone he could trust, because his parents, Gustavo and Helena, had trouble setting boundaries. I always thought my presence, my care, and even the gifts I bought, like games or trips to the movies, were enough to show him the right path. But that summer, everything began to fall apart in ways I never could have predicted. At first, I thought I might be forgetting my own expenses because, let's face it, with work and the hustle and bustle of adult life, sometimes we get overwhelmed. But when I realized the pattern was repeating itself, always missing some money after spending time with Vinicius, my stomach started to flutter. I started noticing the details, the small signs, his hesitation, the averted glances. The feeling of betrayal mixed with worry was overwhelming. I felt my heart tighten, my stomach churn, and at the same time, an anger I couldn't name. It was as if every penny stolen was a stab in the back of my efforts to be present and make a difference. I tried to talk to him, jokingly and seriously approaching him, but Vinicius always found a way to escape, to deny it or laugh it off. I felt helpless, tired, exhausted from trying to be the uncle who believed he could fix everything. The nights became long as I relived every conversation, every gesture, trying to understand where I had gone wrong. Until one day, after noticing again that some of my money was missing, I realized I was faced with a gigantic moral dilemma. Either I continued to be deceived, or I had to act in a way that I myself didn't want to admit. The turning point came when I talked to Rafaela, my longtime friend. She's one of those people who sees life with frightening clarity. Laert, sometimes we need to set boundaries that hurt the ones we love, because love without consequences teaches us nothing, she said, and those words echoed in my mind. I knew I needed a strategy that would demonstrate the gravity of Vinicius's behavior, but at the same time, I didn't want to completely destroy our relationship. Anxiety grew with each passing day, and doubt gnawed at my heart. I was about to cross a line that could turn me into the villain of my own family history. That's when I decided to try something extreme, putting fake money in his wallet, hoping he'd take it and try to spend it. The idea was risky, and my heart raced just thinking about the consequences. I might be making a grave mistake, but it was the only way I could see to open his eyes, and in the process, make Gustavo and Helena see the gravity of the situation. I put the money in, hid in the living room, and waited. Every minute felt like an eternity. My body trembled, my hands sweaty, and my breath shallow. When Vinicius finally tried to use the money in a store, I felt a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The sense of accomplishment mingled with the pain of realizing I'd had to go so far to be heard. When the store refused the counterfeit money, my chest felt like it was about to explode. The feeling of helplessness gave way to a mix of fear and relief. Vinicius didn't understand the gravity of what he'd done. His eyes were wide, filled with confusion and panic, and in that moment, I felt something inside him finally break. Not cruelly, but necessarily. I immediately called Gustavo and Helena, and it was as if each call opened wounds that had been hidden for years. They could no longer pretend there was no problem, could no longer ignore the signs that had been clear for months. In the following days, we were confronted with the reality, no. One wanted to see Vinicius wasn't just taking my money. He was also stealing from his own parents and even from nearby stores, creating a small network with his friends Lucas and Bruno. Every detail that emerged was a punch in the gut. I felt angry at him, sad for my parents, and at the same time an immense responsibility to deal with it all. The weight felt overwhelming, and there were times when I wondered if I had the strength to carry on. the urge to disappear, to escape the whole situation was overwhelming. During this time, I sought out Dr. Ottavio, my lawyer, to understand the legal limits of the trap I had set. The butterflies in my stomach were constant. I wondered if I could be prosecuted, or if I had committed a crime by using counterfeit money to catch my own nephew. Each conversation with him was agonizing, but necessary. I needed to understand the line between teaching and harming, between protecting and punishing. My mind was racing and the nights were too long, filled with thoughts of regret and fear of what might yet come. At the same time, I talked to Raffaella almost every day. She helped me put it into perspective, that love isn't just about being present, but also about setting boundaries. Her advice was like anchors in the midst of the storm, reminding me to breathe and focus on rebuilding the relationship without ignoring the consequences. I began to realize that my presence couldn't just be indulgent or permissive. It needed to be firm, clear, and fair. It was painful, but necessary. Each day, I tried to find the balance between protecting Vinicius and ensuring he learned from his mistakes. It was a slow and painful process. I had to deal with the judgment of family, friends, and even my own internal judgment. There were days when guilt overwhelmed me, wondering if I'd been too extreme. Other times, anger overwhelmed me, reminding me of all the failed attempts at dialogue and care that had failed. Each step in rebuilding required patience, courage, and humility. I realized I couldn't control everything, but I could control how I reacted, how I taught, and how I remained steadfast, even when my heart wanted to give in. After the situation came to light, Vinicius went through difficult times. He faced the police, the shame in front of his classmates, and the disappointed looks of his own parents. I felt a mixture of deep sadness and relief. Sadness at seeing my nephew in trouble, relief that we had finally broken the cycle of denial and permissiveness. During this time, I realized that my role was not just to punish, but to accompany, teach, and offer concrete guidance. Every conversation was tense. He alternated between anger, fear, and tears. My stomach churned just listening to his excuses and justifications, but I had to remain firm. At the same time, I realized that Gustavo and Helena needed help as much as Vinicius. Confronting one's own parenting mistakes isn't easy. They felt guilty, powerless, and ashamed. I saw in their eyes the weight of not having realized it sooner, of not having set clear boundaries. And there, amidst the chaos, I needed to be strong, not only for Vinicius, but for them too. Every family gathering was painful, and my body felt tired, tense, and with constant headaches. My racing heart with every argument reminded me that this was more than just a financial problem. It was the rebuilding of an entire family. We decided that Vinicius would need to face real consequences, but also learning opportunities. I accompanied him to meetings with school counselors, psychologists, and even social responsibility activities to understand the impact of his actions. It was impressive to see how small actions had a huge impact on his behavior. The rebellious teenager began to show signs of reflection. Not every day was easy, but gradual changes were evident. My body, previously tense, began to relax in small moments of victory, but my mind was still on constant alert. There were times when I thought about giving up, walking away and leaving the family to deal with it alone. The frustration was overwhelming, and the feeling of helplessness followed me like a shadow. But every look from Vinicius, every small gesture of recognition and regret reminded me why I had chosen to stay. I wanted him to have a real chance to recover and learn. Courage in that moment was staying present even in the face of chaos, even in the face of anger, disappointment, and the fear of making another mistake. At the end of that process, I realized that rebuilding isn't quick or linear. Each step requires patience, reflection, and consistent action. I learned that love often demands sacrifice, steadfastness, and difficult decisions. I still feel pain when I remember some moments, but I'm also proud of what we were able to build. Vinicius isn't perfect, and his life will still have its ups and downs, but he now understands that actions have consequences, that trust must be earned, and that there are clear boundaries even for those we love deeply. Over time, I began to notice small changes in my daily life. Vinicius was no longer the teenager who stole without thinking, and his attitude at home began to adjust. He still made mistakes, of course, but he began to show genuine remorse and try to make amends where he could. Every gesture of honesty, however small, was a reminder that all the effort was worth it. I felt lighter at times, as if the tension I'd carried for months began to dissipate, and this gave me hope that the path I'd chosen, though painful, had been the right one. During this time, I also had to deal with my own guilt and regret. The decision to use counterfeit money wasn't easy, and I often wondered if I'd been too cruel, but Dr. Otavio helped me understand that, despite the extreme strategy, my goal was educational, not punitive. And Rafaela continued to be my voice of reason, reminding me that it's not about being perfect, but about doing what's necessary to protect and teach. Little by little, I learned to balance my roles as uncle, counselor, and responsible adult without losing my humanity. Those were days of much conversation, tears, and frustration. Some nights, I would wake up in the middle of the night, remembering every gesture, every decision, and the consequences that could have been worse. The fear of failing Vinicius was constant, but I realized that to help him, I needed to be there, firmly and patiently. Deep breathing became a daily exercise, and each small step forward was celebrated as a giant victory. I learned to appreciate every sign of change, no matter how small, because it was concrete proof that he could learn and grow. The relationship with his parents also began to improve. Gustavo and Helena began implementing clear rules, boundaries, and firmer routines. I remained supportive, but realized I needed to let go of control and allow them to take responsibility as well. It was painful to admit that for months I'd been carrying a burden that wasn't just mine, but this realization was liberating. I realized that rebuilding the family required collaboration, communication, and above all, the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Today, looking back, I can see the entire journey clearly. There are still days of tension, arguments, and regrets, but the progress is real. I learned that educating and loving require courage, boundaries, and presence, even when it hurts. The experience transformed me. It taught me patience, resilience, and how to deal with the people we love, even when their choices hurt us deeply. I realized that we may fail, but it is possible to rebuild, teach, and inspire as long as we don't give up halfway. Today, looking at Vinicius, I can see not only the teenager who made a mistake, but the young man who is learning from each consequence. He still stumbles, still tests limits, but now there is dialogue, understanding, and responsibility. It's impossible to describe the mixture of pride and relief I feel, realizing that my actions, however harsh they may have been, paved the way for him to understand the importance of making the right choices. Every sincere smile, every gesture of repentance, reminds me that all the effort was worth it. I still struggle with the guilt of having to go to such extreme lengths, but I've learned that sometimes protecting someone we love requires difficult decisions. Constant presence, firmness, and patience were my most powerful weapons. Every painful conversation, every shared tear, every imposed limit was a step in the right direction. And even though Vinicius still faces challenges, he now has the tools to deal with them, an awareness of the consequences, and an uncle who won't abandon him. Rafaela was with me every step of the way, reminding me that strength isn't the absence of fear, but the courage to act even in the face of it. Dr. Otavio helped navigate the legal aspects, preventing my actions from becoming a problem for me or my family. And in the end, I realized that it's not just about teaching Vinicius, but about rebuilding ourselves as a family. I learned the importance of clear boundaries, shared responsibility, and the transformative power of patience and presence. Today I can write this and breathe more easily. I still feel pain and memories that tighten my chest, but I also see the light at the end of the tunnel. Overcoming obstacles isn't about erasing past mistakes, but learning from them, facing the pain, and moving forward. Vinicius now has the opportunity to build a better path, and I, Laerte, can finally see that, even in the face of disappointment and extreme choices, it's possible to overcome and teach by example. If there's one lesson I've taken with me, it's that true love requires courage, boundaries, and constant presence. Sometimes we need to cross lines that scare us so that those we love understand the value of honesty, responsibility, and respect. Despite the falls, the tears, and the fear, it's possible to rebuild, learn, and grow together. Vinicius still has a long way to go, and so do I. But today, finally, I feel we're on the right track, learning and strengthening bonds that once seemed fragile.